Looking for financial insights you can trust?
How do you protect yourself as an investor? What's the strategy?
I think it's really simple. I think you just want to be diversified in your portfolio.
The Payne family brings real-world experience to every conversation.
Well, I think that's the problem right now is, right, a lot of people that are close to retirement, they're taking so much risks. And if we do get a big sell-off, it could derail their retirement.
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day. Yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network. It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's the left versus the right. I'm David Paterson, and once again, I am joined by the distinguished Judge Richard Weinberg, and we always have, basically a good time on this show. But I want to begin the show by addressing a situation that's come up in the past few days. It had to do with an article printed last Tuesday, the 4th of December. Last Tuesday was the 2nd of December, and it had to do with the Young Republican Club of New York is having a gala, and they are going to invite to speak at that gala a well-known German leader from the far right whose name is Markus Frohnmayer. Mr. Frohnmayer has made a number of statements from time to time. He has even offered that there should be a whole new way that German society is run, and some of his remarks have been more than just antagonistic. Now, this all comes after 2 months ago, there was a video chat by members of the state Young Republican Party. 2,900 pages of data came from this chat when Politico was able to go on and record it. And in this particular chat, there were racist remarks, there were anti-Semitic remarks, there were just completely brazen and dysfunctional commentary coming out of some of the speakers at this situation, including an issue where somebody said they were getting off the chat to watch a basketball game, and one of the other members said, if I was going to watch a basketball game, I wouldn't watch one that monkeys are playing. So this is some really nasty stuff. And very happily, the state, New York State Republican chair, Ed Cox, along with the gubernatorial candidate from upstate, Elise Stefanik, disbanded this group and condemned all of their actions. Now, in this situation, Your Honor, a lot of Democrats are coming out and trying to use this to smear Stefanik. She came right out when the situation happened and condemned it. There's no reason to try to make political hay over what she did, which was the right thing to do. However, just whatever it is in the air right now that is stoking this anger and this antagonism and acrimony between different groups in our society is really starting to get to the core of my stomach.
Very well said, Governor. And it's a delight to be back with you on Left versus Right, which is in the nature of a consumer fraud, since we're both centrist, moderate Democrats. Yes. Neither one of us is on the left and neither one of us is on the right. But the show gives us an opportunity to sit and chat and exchange ideas and stories and raise concerns of matters that the people should know about. So let me address 2 points. Let me do the micro and let me do the macro.
Great.
Okay. The micro is this incident where the so-called Young Republicans invited this alleged radical right speaker from Germany, and he's alleged to have said favorable things about the Nazi Party in Germany's history, as well as Hitler. I have no idea if those allegations are true or not. What is true is that based on this chat that went on a number of months ago, Chairman Ed Cox, a good friend of yours, a good friend of mine, works with us on Katz and Cosby on Thursday and Friday nights when we do the show between 5 and 6 on WABC. A man of great integrity, great ability, great leadership. As soon as Ed heard about this, and to credit Congresswoman Stefanik, they repudiated this group. And in fact, what they did is they excommunicated this group. So this group, which denominates itself as Young Republicans, I say are engaged in a consumer fraud. And that consumer fraud is they have no right to use the name Republican. They have no right to identify themselves as having anything to do with the Republican Party. They do not have anything to do with the Republican Party.
So in other words, since he disbanded them, they haven't gotten back together. They haven't applied to be part of the Republican Party, and therefore should not have been using that name in any of their rhetoric.
Exactly right, Governor.
And
they should not. There's no such thing as a Young Republican group in the state. It's been disbanded. It's been excommunicated. They shouldn't be using it. It's a consumer fraud. And I would hope the state Republicans would get some lawyers to go into court and to have that rescinded, get an injunction against them from using that name, because they have nothing to do with the Republican Party. So let's be clear on that.
Right.
That's the micro issue, Governor. The macro issue, which is a matter of real concern that you and I have talked about both on radio and as well as personally when we're together. We're living in a very psychologically damaged society now here in the United States, perhaps worldwide, but let me focus on the United States. And what's that psychological damage? The damage is that people cannot disagree on political issues without making your opponent on the political issue not just an adversary, but an enemy. People will not share a dinner with people who have different political perspectives. They will not invite them to Thanksgiving dinner. They don't talk to each other, members of the same family. It's preposterous. It's a pathology. It's not officially certified mental illness, but it should be. Some people call it Trump derangement syndrome. And I will tell you a story in a moment. I'll tell you two stories. First story is a psychologist wrote a column a week ago in the New York Post, and he started talking about this Trump derangement syndrome. And he started talking about how unhealthy it is, that everything is viewed through the lens of ideology or politics, and the hostility that's engendered, and the discomfort that people have dealing with other people who don't share their values and don't ratify their belief system. And this is a very dangerous place to be, because you have to have common shared values. At the least common shared value, and the most important, is respect for somebody else's divergent point of view. Agree respectfully to disagree. And that's a big pathology. So he writes this article. A week later, he writes a follow-up article. And guess what? They attacked him for writing this article, called him a lover of Hitler and a fascist, because he pointed out about the pathology. All he was doing as a professional was pointing out how unhealthy it was for the individuals as well as for the larger society. So the people who went after him and attacked him personally, calling him a Hitler lover and a fascist, proved his point beyond a doubt, that this is pathological behavior. It's not rational behavior. So that's one story, Governor. Second story. Once upon a time, before I was on the bench, I was the general counsel to the New York City Council and chief counsel to the Speaker, Peter Vallone. And you know this as an elected official, when you walk into City Hall, to the right is the council side of the City Hall, to the left is the mayor's side. And right next to the council side is room 9, which is where the reporters are. So all the City Hall reporters are there. And I knew all the reporters when I was there. It's part of my job to chat with them and keep them informed. And part of their job was to ask me questions about what was going on in the council. And one particular person who I knew, didn't know well, but knew, over the years has tried to keep in contact with me. A number of months ago, he phones me out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him for a while. And he starts ranting and raving about Trump and objecting to some of the things I said on the radio show, whether it was a radio show that I've been your guest, or whether it's the show I'm on every night, Cass and Cosby, or whether it's my own show called Let the Record Show, which I do with Chairman Jesse Garcia, Republican Party, and Eric Levine, a noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I don't know which show he objected to, but he started carrying on that how could I support Trump? I said, I deal with Trump. I said, I'm not a MAGA supporter. I'm not a Trump acolyte. But when Trump is correct, and I agree with him on policy, I'll support it. And when I think he's wrong, I'll say that as well. Because I try to deal with things on the merits, rationally. And he started ranting and raving at me on the phone. And I said to him, I said, look, if you're not going to talk respectfully and calmly, this conversation's over. He continued in that vein. And I said, well, goodbye, and I hung up. Hadn't heard from him for months on the phone, but he kept sending me commentary about what I had said, about different articles about Trump, about different policies, what was going on.
So clearly he's going off the deep end.
Exactly. So he sends me, earlier in this week, Governor, he sends me the following in a text. He said, you would have voted for Hitler. Get that. He's telling me, wow, a Jewish American, a nice Jewish boy originally from Brooklyn, that I would have voted for Hitler. Well, first of all, I'm old, but I'm not that old. Secondly, I don't think I would have. I don't think any of my relatives who had escaped the Holocaust would have voted for him. But he then sends some article in the New York Times ranting and raving about Trump, which I didn't bother to read, frankly, because I wasn't interested in seeing it. So I respond back. I said to him, look, you really don't know who I am. You don't understand me. You should know better, knowing me for decades. I'm a common sense centrist. I always have been, always will be. I deal with issues on the merits. He responds by ranting and raving at me again. He said, you voted for Trump. That's enough. Trump is evil. He's the incarnation of evil. He's greedy. He's a racist. He's a fascist. He's a criminal. You should be in jail. He goes on and on and on. I respond. I said, look, please refrain from having this conversation with me. If you can't talk civilly and you can't make these personal attacks, don't bother to do that. I said, so please stop. Otherwise, we'll have no further communication. He responds by another rant and rave in the same lines. So then I said, obviously you have not gotten the message. And I said, I signed off in a paraphrase of Edward R. Murrow's language. Edward R. Murrow, as you recall, used to end his shows by saying, good night and good luck. I ended mine by saying goodbye and good luck. He responds to me by saying, how dare I talk about Edward R. Murrow, a great American, when I'm a fascist and a lover of Hitler and da-da-da. Okay. So I then respond, goodbye. And one of my learned colleagues, since I'm a person of the 20th century, have a hard time with technology, showed me how to cut him off from any communication with me.
Yes, exactly.
So that's where he took my phone.
Block him.
And he blocked. That's the exact term of art. So he blocked him. So why do I tell this story as well as a story about the psychiatrist, psychologist? Because this pathology is in fact close to a mental illness. You cannot have a civil society unless you respect somebody else's rights to have a different opinion, unless you're willing to listen calmly and rationally and have a debate and discussion on the issues. If you're not willing to do that, we'll never have a common sense center, and you have a breakdown of civilization and society. Well, see you, Governor.
Well, I'm not going to allow the conversation to devolve into a discussion of psychiatry by two people who neither of whom is a psychiatrist. But what I would say is that I did work in the Queen's DA's office under supervision back in the mid-'80s. And my specific job was to work with people who had mental disease or disability. And it was what you described, what happened in a number of cases. Someone knew someone. Years later, somehow this person gets on their radar and they start ranting and raving. And in this case, it was threatening and walking in front of the person's house and that kind of thing. And we had to do things about it. I think your former colleague, who was a colleague of other people down at City Hall, has flipped out. Like something in his life, which I would suggest doesn't even have anything to do with you, has, for some reason, ranged his ire in your direction over the past, few months. I want to apologize on behalf of the rest of humanity for his conduct. But what I thought was also interesting about the situation involving the young Republicans is that the Vice President of the United States and the Secretary of State both made remarks condemning the people who condemned what this German leader stands for. And I thought that was particularly interesting because most of the other members of the Republican Party, and the Republican Party, I must say, is far greater at addressing these issues than the Democratic Party. Most Republicans have wanted to put this individual and the people who wanted to have him speak at their gala in exile. So I just hope that the president doesn't know what his vice president and his secretary of state is, because Rubio really went to a great deal of trouble to talk about how terrible it was that they were attacking the Republicans. And had they done something to attack the Republicans, he would have been right. But this was something the Young Republican Club of New York City. So-called. Well, see, the Republican Party of New York City is still in existence. It has not been discounted or...
What, the Young Republicans?
The Young Republicans from New York City.
Okay.
The ones from the state were cut off, as we mentioned before, by Chairman Cox and Congresswoman Stefanik, which I thought was very admirable on both of their sides. But, the political people that want to take advantage of anything anyone else does, they've tried to connect it to the midterm elections and that kind of thing. And it appalls me that even members of my party would not just take the easy way out and condemn what was said, but now want to interpret what this means between now and next year. Who the hell knows what's going to happen between now and November of 2026?
Well, I have to say, I don't know about what Vice President Vance or Secretary Rubio said in connection with the criticisms of this group, or whether they were trying to defend against a generalized attack against the Republican Party. I don't know that they would be defending this particular group or this particular speaker. I don't know. Well, in Rubio's case, he seemed to be defending the German leader, and he said, and maybe there's some substance to this, that what he's really trying to fight in Germany is the rise of the left in German government and in German society. That's why the leader said we need a new standard for what conduct would be in Germany. That's very interesting. I don't know. Then look, you have to be very careful because words matter, and you have to be very careful how you express yourself, because as we say in our business, a cannon will be used against you. Every time. So sometimes, as I used to say to the lawyers who appeared before me, if you have nothing to say, don't say it. And I believe in that. And many a time I would sit in meetings when I was a lawyer, and if I had nothing to add to the conversation, I didn't feel any urgency to say anything. And people would come up to me at the end of the meeting and say, you didn't say anything. I said, I had nothing to contribute. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just sit there quietly, take it all in, and then deal with whatever you have to deal with down the road. Or as Paul Newman said in Cool Hand Luke, sometimes nothing is a cool hand. That's exactly right. And Paul Newman being one of my favorite actors. Oh, me too. Wonderful, I agree. But so who am I to dispute Paul Newman? But I would say I don't know what Vance said. I don't know what Rubio said, but I do know that we just got the signal, Governor, it's time for a break. So now that it's time for a break,
We'll find out what our sponsors have to say. And you're on WABC with Judge Richard Weinberg and David Paterson here as your hosts on The Left versus the Right on this Saturday afternoon. We'll be back right after these messages.
It's The Left versus the Right. The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Left versus the Right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network. It's The Left versus the Right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
We're back. I know you thought we wouldn't be back, but yes, we're back. The station is allowing the two of us to continue talking because we're trying to help and not deceive. We're trying to do right and not be, untoward. And one of the things that also is on my nerves, and this is why I've invited Judge Weinberg here, because you may not know this, those of you in the audience, but privately he is my therapist. And my issue is about the Park East Synagogue on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, not far from where I live. What happened there, how now it's happened in Los Angeles. What I was alluding to in the beginning of the show is how it's all part of a rising wave of anti-Semitism, not just in this country, but in other places. And I want to know where the hell this is coming from, because nothing has happened. Even the anti-Semitism that is voiced toward the state of Israel, I'd like to know what they've done to magnify this issue from, I would say, what it was 20 or 30 years ago. And I'm not saying we weren't fighting anti-Semitism 30 years ago because we didn't have it. I'm just saying that at the level it was then compared to now is minuscule.
Well, I think that's exactly right. So let's flash back. I think perhaps in an earlier discussion, another time we were together on this show, we talked about a book by Laura Z. Hobson called Gentleman's Agreement.
You brought that up.
Right, and there was a movie with Gregory Peck and John Garfield in it as well. And it dealt with what I would call country club anti-Semitism. It was kind of a version. The Jewish community would be tolerated, but you can't be a member of my country club or my private city club. You can't go to the same schools I go to, and if you go to the same schools, you can't be a member of the dinner clubs that they had at, for example, at Princeton or Yale or Harvard. When you graduated law school, no matter how high you were up in the class, you couldn't get into certain law firms or you go into some industries. There were quotas on how many Jews could go into the Ivy League schools. But that was, I don't want to call it benign because that would be too kind. There was anti-Semitism, but it wasn't with the violence and the hatred and the vitriol and the openness that we have today. So to answer your question, why is it more obvious today? Why is it more vitriolic? Why is it more bitter, angry? Why is it more violent? A couple of things are going on at the same time. You have the growing threat worldwide of Islamist ideology, which is both religious and political. It's an ideology of no tolerance for different groups. No tolerance at all for the Jewish community, but certainly no tolerance for the Christian community or Buddhists or Zoroastrians or any other group that's not part of the Muslim community. And it's even a fight between the Sunnis and the Shiites about who's the correct interpreter of their religion and who the right apostles of that religion are.
Well, we've found historically that sometimes when these far-out groups take over a country or, some part of the world, the first thing that happens is insurrection. They start fighting among each other.
Well, yeah, that's true. But But with respect to, because of this spread of Islamist, and I'm not talking about all Muslims, let's be clear about that. I'm talking about a strain of Muslim ideology where there's some support for it in the Quran, and certainly support in the charter of the Muslim Brotherhood created in Egypt in the 1920s, where it's a direct hostility to the Jewish community and other groups that don't adhere to them.
Absolutely.
Remember, it's hegemonic. Their belief is it's world domination. And if you look at it, what they want to do is they want to infiltrate other societies and bend the other societies to their will and accept their worldview and their religious views. That's very dangerous. There's no tolerance for diversity of a thought, opinion, of speech, or freedom of religion, or freedom from religion. So that's part of it. So that's the what I call the Greens. Then there's the Reds, the Socialists, the radical left. And there's been a marriage now, at least temporarily, between the radical socialists, some indeed are communists, who are also anti-Semitic and anti-Western civilization and want to change everything. They're anti-capitalist, they're anti-Western civilization. The State of Israel is an ally to the United States of America and is the first defender of Western civilization. In fact, in a very real sense, Israelis are fighting the fight that other people don't. They lose their young in this fight. And it's not because the United States or certain European countries like the Jewish community so much, but they get a lot out of the Jewish community. What do they get? They get scientific advancements, technological advancement, medical advancements, intelligence, and armed forces that fight the fight to keep the extremists in line. And so you have the convergence of the radical left socialists / communists and the convergence of the Islamists, and they're together and they hate the Jews and they see the Jews as a first bulwark against these waves to replace Western civilization with their own view. So that's part of what's going on. Second part of what's going on is that it's very, very well funded. And it's funded by different nation states. For example, Iran, Qatar, Saudi Arabia for years used to do that. Supposedly they've backed off on this. Turkey. And for their own political agendas, they've been supporting this wave. And how did it all start? On October 6th, they had relative peace between the people who lived in Gaza and the people in the state of Israel. In fact, when Sharon was the prime minister at the time, abandoned Gaza and gave it to the people living in Gaza, they had industry there, they had agriculture there, they had research, they had hospitals, they had schools, they had a thriving industry, they had an infrastructure, they had roads, and they had sanitation, and they had water. They had everything they needed to have a thriving community.
But that wasn't enough.
Well, because the ideology is you have to destroy Israel.
Exactly.
When they say, Governor, from the river to the sea, that means the extermination of the state of Israel and the Jewish people living there. Where are they supposed to go? And long before there was a religion called Islam, the Jewish community had their roots in that territory. So if anybody has a historical claim, hundreds and hundreds of years, much before the rise of the Islamic religion, the Jews and the Hebrew religion, they occupied that territory, and they fought many wars, including wars against the Romans for some sort of autonomy against the Roman Empire. They were there long before anybody knew there was such a thing as Muhammad or Allah or any of those things. So that battle goes on because they want to exterminate the state of Israel and the Jewish community. And that's a real problem. And it's more manifest today than ever. And you go back to what happened at the Park East Synagogue, Governor, where these people were violating the constitutional rights of the people going in and out of a synagogue. So much so that it had to be broken up by the critical response group. And that's why you need a critical response group to break this up. And if you don't have a critical response group, then violence would have unfolded. And it happened again just yesterday, the day before, in L.A., where they attacked people in a synagogue in Los Angeles. So this is going on all over. There was a nice young couple who were engaged, and they went to an event, a fundraising event to help the downtrodden at the Jewish Museum
here
in Washington, D.C. And these two young people were murdered. Remember that?
Yeah.
And and you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of incidents of violent attacks against members of the Jewish community, or people who are perceived to be members of the Jewish community. And this has to be stopped because the line from the Protestant theologian in Germany said first they came for the Jews, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was nobody left to defend me. What are your thoughts?
I was thinking of the Jewish couple this past Wednesday who were leaving a fundraising event and were assaulted. They were not killed, but it was a harrowing experience for them. And
here in New York.
Right here in New York. Manhattan, Lower Manhattan. I just can't think of the event. But there must be something that is triggering this particular acrimony. What is it? When I go home at night, I don't think of how anybody else is holding me back. I don't think of hatred for other people who perhaps maybe are doing better than I am. And many of the people who've engaged in this type of conduct are doing very much better than I am. So I don't, just from a theological reference, I don't even understand why this happens. I mean, there obviously years ago, there was this sense that there weren't enough people helping as we were building the country. So they went to Africa and rounded up a bunch of slaves and brought them back. And so even as horrible and just as awful as that was, you could understand the reason why it happened. It was wrong, but they thought that they convinced themselves that the people that they brought over were inferior to them and got other people to believe it. I don't understand what this attempt at what are they going to do after they take over the world? Go to Mars?
Well, why not? I mean, there's no limit to their ambitions. Look, the problem is October 6th is peace. October 7th, they attacked. They killed about 1,200 people. They kidnapped a couple of hundred more. They tortured and murdered in the cruelest possible way. They cut open the stomachs of pregnant women. They beheaded people. They set people who on fire who were alive. They cut babies and put them in ovens. That was on October 7th. You know what happened the very next day on October 8th? There were demonstrations at college campuses yelling Free Palestine. Excuse me?
Yeah.
Free Palestine. So it shows it was orchestrated, and they were all pre-printed signs. So in other words, and they were all dressed up in the same uniforms, with the same facial masks.
It's amazing that a secret like that could be kept, because once you put something on paper or on a sign, usually somehow, some way, it gets to the individuals that it's intended for.
All over the country, Governor, you had the same signs, the same T-shirts with the same symbols and expressions, same uniforms, same kinds of masks. Obviously, this was paid for. These were organized demonstrations. These were not spontaneous rallies.
But isn't it amazing that even in paying for that, there were so many signs and so many campuses that displayed them that this had to be like the biggest secret that's been kept in a long time for that to happen. But
let's do a flashback. The same thing, the same phenomenon happened in 2020, summer of 2020, the summer of love, if you recall, where they were burning down cities and taking over police stations and attacking courthouses, the BLM riots and the Antifa riots. And the same thing happened. They jumped out of the trucks with the same signs, the same T-shirts, the same uniforms, the same masks. So obviously this is carefully orchestrated and carefully funded. Now, who benefits by this? What's the expression? Who benefits? The old Latin expression? The Latin, of course, I now forget. But who benefits? Who benefits are those who would divide us. And one of the dangers is that they're sowing this internal division in the United States between different groups into tribal warfare. And ultimately, who will benefit? Our enemies, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, the Qataris, the North Koreans, the Cubans, the Venezuelans. Anybody who does not wish us well will benefit by a divided America because it makes us easy prey to these outside forces. And so in World War II, they used to call these internal forces, they used to call them fifth columnists. And that's what you have. You have the generation carefully funded, carefully organized, just looking for an excuse to go in and riot.
And that's what I think happened in the summer of 2020. There was legitimate anger. I felt the anger, not about anything that George Floyd did. He was a drug addict. He had all kinds of problems. My anger came from the way that he was restrained, which killed him. And a lot of people felt that way, and a lot of people voiced it. But it never would have occurred to me to inflict violence on other people when what I was upset about involved violence in the first place. There was no reason to, in other words, because he got choked to death, now we should go out and choke everybody that looks like the police officer to death. And I've just never understood the capacity of some people to make that determination.
Well, there's no consistent moral code.
No, not at all.
Or worldview. I mean, the one thing I have to file a dissenting opinion, but we just got the sign. We have to hold off on my dissenting opinion until our next discussion in the last part of the show today.
Well, we will now take a break, and we'll be back around 4:30 when I'll listen to the judge's dissenting opinion. But actually, if it's shorter than that, we'll be back right after these commercial messages.
It's the left versus the right. The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network. It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
We're back. The judge was getting pretty antagonized, so we want him to have his time to give his dissenting opinion, and then we'll see what else is going on in the world here on The Left versus the Right on WABC 77 Radio. Your Honor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Governorship. So let's be clear. I wasn't agitated, and I wasn't offended. I just wanted to file a dissenting opinion. And that's to do with the facts and circumstances of George Floyd's death. Okay. I'm not a fan of excessive police force used against defendants or perpetrators. I believe in necessary, reasonable force to be used. There are real questions about what was the proximate cause of the death of Mr. Floyd. Some of the evidence came out of trial. Some of the evidence actually was excluded from trial. But the alternative narrative was as follows: that George Floyd was so hopped up with drugs that the amount of force needed to restrain him took the force of three or four police officers. That's number one. And my experience, having run special narcotics courts in the city of New York and state Supreme Court, with respect to all five boroughs of the city of New York, is when people are very hopped up on certain drugs, their power, their physical strength is enormous. It does take more than one person to restrain. Okay?
The only thing is, at the time that Derek Chauvin, the officer, had his knee on him, he said, "I can't breathe." Now, if he had all this strength, he should have been able to get rid of Officer Chauvin. He didn't, and as he continued to say he can't breathe, he finally stopped because he wasn't breathing.
Well, but the question is, what was? Let's go back to the term of art I used, proximate cause. Was the proximate cause of death the so-called chokehold used against him, or was the cause of death the drugs? The reason he couldn't breathe is because he was so hopped up on drugs that was killing him anyway, that he would have died anyway. And that's the unanswered question. Notwithstanding that the jury verdict convicting Chauvin and a couple of other officers. That still is a very real question. I don't have the answer to that, but it's worthy of more investigation because there was enough evidence to raise a reasonable doubt about what the proximate cause was, but nobody was interested in really getting to that truth, if they could establish that truth, because the population was so charged up for a guilty verdict against Chauvin and the other officers. That's what happened. But let's switch gears, if we may. So on Thursday of this week, Governor, I went to the Federal Law Enforcement Council lunch, and you had all the major leaders of law enforcement, federal law enforcement, speak. And the first speaker at the event was our distinguished police commissioner, Jessica Tisch. And Jessica Tisch has been a great police commissioner. We've been lucky to have her. The crime numbers since she's police commissioner under Mayor Adams have gone down considerably. She's reorganized and made the department more effective. Morale is very high indeed. Crime is down in certain categories of crime. You always have to worry about no criminal victim wants to take solace in the fact that crime is down when he or she is the victim, and that's understandable. The perception of crime is just as important as the reality of the numbers. But we're lucky indeed to have Jessie Tisch as a police commissioner. Now, she recently indicated that she would accept continued employment and appointment by the mayor-elect, Zohran Mamdani, as a police commissioner. Excuse me. Now, I have mixed feelings about that. I want to get your thoughts about it.
Interesting.
On the one hand, I have very negative feelings about the mayor-elect.
No.
Believe it or not. I think he espouses racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Israeli propaganda. He doesn't repudiate intifada, which is and jihad, which are permanent warfare and violence against innocent people in the name of Islamist supremacy. I think this is very dangerous indeed. I don't know that he can be a mayor of all the people of the city. Jesse Tisch's own brother the other day in remarks before some group said he thought that Zohran Mamdani was an enemy of the Jewish people. I'll let the brother of the police commissioner speak for himself, but that's his view. And a large number of Jewish community feel that way. I have real doubts how successful she can be unless he's willing to listen to her and tone down his rhetoric, and more importantly, be responsible in his actions. So, for example, what you don't do is you don't cut back on the hiring of police, because you need police for actual protection as well as perception of safety. You don't cut back on and eliminate the criminal response group, because you need them to deal with riot situations. You don't send social workers into emotionally disturbed households. They're not capable of dealing with the violence that comes out of these domestic violence situations, emotionally disturbed. There's a real problem. You don't have safety on the streets by cutting back on stop, inquire, and frisk, because then the guns come out on the street rather than stay in the homes. So you have to be very, very careful about what Mamdani is going to do and not do. If he listens to Jessica Tisch, he can be very successful in protecting public safety. If he continues in going forward with the views he has and establishes that as policy, because after all, he is the chief executive officer of the city, then this is a clear and present danger to the public safety of New York. And I don't know how Jessie Tisch can stay in that position, since she is a person of great integrity, great leadership, and she certainly does not need the job. She's doing this as a public service. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that I have a tendency to support bravery among public servants. So, for instance, I'm sure that the commissioner has gotten some pushback that, why would you do this? This guy's an anti-Semite, that kind of thing. But she's in a department where, as you have just espoused, she has done very well. She's helped cut the crime even more than it was before she got there by Mayor Adams. And so she is, in that regard, I think I support that she stays there as long as she can. Now, in other words, there was a previous commissioner who resigned because she felt that the Adams administration wasn't listening to her. But I don't think at the time she resigned that she had really the support or the just the respect of. She hadn't gotten to that point where she had it yet. She just resigned.
And she's a very qualified person.
Yes, absolutely.
And the people in NYPD had a lot of affection and respect for her.
But I think that Commissioner Tisch's achievements, not just as a police commissioner, but she's headed other agencies as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we are sitting together one day at her inauguration as mayor. But I really think that she's playing with the house's money right now, Richard. She can go along, and if she thinks it's not working, it's going to hurt Mamdani more than he could ever hurt her.
Oh, I agree with that. And look, if she realizes that he's not going to do what's necessary to protect and defend this city and its people, and she leaves, that'll be a major blow to his legitimacy.
And by the way, there may be an inkling of it getting started already, because Mamdani said he wants to keep the police numbers the way they are. That's 34,000 officers. 4,000 of those 34,000 officers are eligible for retirement in January. So they could lose 12% of the force, whether Mamdani adds officers or not. And the fact that he didn't seem to know that when he said it concerns me to a great degree, because either he knows it and is ignoring it, or he doesn't know. Well, neither are acceptable to me.
I think that's well said. Look, when I was at City Hall, I worked on 14. I'm not a numbers cruncher, but I was the chief legal officer of the city council. So I worked on 14 city budgets with the legal issues. And I keenly observed what was going on when the numbers crunchers allocated where the resources were going and not going. One of the easiest ways to save money to balance a budget is to not go forward with a police class. So just by not going forward and funding a police class and holding back for a year, you deplete the force because, as you correctly point out, retirements.
Right.
Okay. We should be adding police, not depleting them.
I agree completely.
Now, one of the issues that may come up very quickly is the cameras on the streets. The cameras on the streets that help on law enforcement in terms of finding out who the perpetrators of crime are and also act as a deterrent of crime. He's already said he doesn't like this. So he's going to get, and by the way, this is Jesse Tisch's initiative. These cameras all over the city. And by the way, you just don't need it for so-called street crime. You need it there because of New York being the number one spot in the United States for terrorism. So you need that to protect us against terrorism, whether terrorism is Islamist terrorism or right-wing terrorism or left-wing terrorism. You need to have these cameras in place. And he says he wants to get rid of them. So if he gets rid of them, that's no good. He wants to get rid of the gang database. Gang database is very, very important to tracking who's perpetrating the crimes.
Absolutely.
You need the great thing that Bill Bratton did as commissioner with Jack Maples as his deputy is they created a system called ComStat, which tracked where crimes were occurring, and then he deployed resources and staff to that.
And it also helped them identify where known, I'll use the word troublemakers,
exactly,
are residing.
Exactly. So, so this argument that because more, black and brown people are arrested and go through the criminal justice system, in terms of percentage versus their population, the fact is, where's the crime being committed? All the numbers are to tell you where the crime is committed. So if there's more crime being perpetrated in a black or brown community, it's not because there's they call it in civil rights law, and you know this, they call it disparate impact. Look, it's not because it's racially motivated because of bias. It's the numbers are telling where the crime is occurring. So if there's more arrests made in communities of color, that's because that's where the crime is occurring. And by the way, who are the victims of crime in black and brown communities? Are the black and brown citizens and residents. So you're protecting more black and brown lives by assigning police to those areas and policing those neighborhoods.
And by the way, that's where the greatest amount of support has come since that happened, because the number of African Americans, Hispanic Americans is so much greater than the number of black or brown people that commit crimes. Then it's easy to understand how people say, you know, I used to be afraid to walk down this block. I walk down this block all the time now because the people that used to be the hindrances have been taken away. They're in jail.
Well, look, the fact is, I sat on the bench 15 years, first criminal court, then Supreme. I believe in alternative sanctions. I believe in giving back to the community. I believe in programs. But I also believe that certain people have to be put in jail for the protection of the larger society and for innocent victims. I think it's absolutely essential that you do that, because having a social worker have a friendly conversation with somebody is not going to solve people who have evil intentions or have a depravity of soul, who do violence against their fellow human beings. That's all. And you have to understand that. And it's naive to think anything other than that. So when people talk about the decarceration movement, which is don't put anybody in jail, it's society's fault. Well, who's going to protect the innocent people when you have these deviants hurting their fellow human beings?
I always thought that it would be a better idea to try to weed out from the people who wind up going to jail who is just went the wrong way in life, or who clearly wants to create problems for everyone else in life. And my conclusion was that way you'd have a better idea of who would be a lesser danger to society when they came out. So I see that we have come to that hour, Your Honor. It's almost 4:00. It's almost time for my main man, who walked into the studio last week when I was sitting there. I almost had a heart attack. John Sterling, the father of Sports Talk Radio, will follow us. Thank you again, Your Honor, for joining us.
It's always a privilege and pleasure, Governor. Thank you for having me. I look forward to doing this again whenever you want me.
Look forward to next Saturday, because it may come to that. Everybody have a great weekend. WABC, John Sterling is next. Thanks for listening.
It's the left versus the right. Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
Listen to this podcast now on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Idea Gen Global Podcast with George Sifakis.
I'm George Sifakis. In a world overflowing with noise, there is one forum where the world's smartest voices connect, where visionaries sit at the same table as innovators, and great minds don't just talk, they act.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.